everyone to please silence your cell phones. Thank you. City Clerk, will you please call the roll of the City Council members to go on the record as in attendance?
Councilmember Mendoza? Here. Here. Councilmember LeBaron?
Good evening, everybody. Councilmember LeBaron here.
Councilmember Snow?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gaston?
Here.
Mayor Vasquez?
Here. I would like to ask our Lieutenant McAvoy to lead us in the pledge.
Okay. Expecting that. Start head in your heart. Ready, begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Are there any changes to the agenda?
We have no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. With no changes to the agenda at this time, we will move on to our general public comment portion of the meeting. During the general public comment portion of the meeting, I see that I'm being interrupted by Councilmember LeBaron. I'm being interrupted by Councilmember LeBaron.
Am I allowed to speak? I'm sorry. Okay, so. Madam Mayor, I would like to ask to pull agenda item 1D from the consent calendar.
Although we have moved on to our public comment portion of the meeting, I will acknowledge Councilmember LeBaron's request to remove the item from the agenda. I'll check with our council members to see if there's a second regarding that change.
It's acceptance of fiscal year 2022 State Homeland Security Grant Program funds.
And so, at this point in time, we do not have a second for that request, and so the request fails. Moving on to the general public comment portion of the meeting. During the general public comment portion of this meeting, the public may express their concerns not pertaining to items on the agenda tonight. Please note that in accordance with state law, the City Council is not permitted to respond to any comments expressed by the public. If appropriate, staff will be directed to follow up with the speaker, or the topic may be brought to the City Council for consideration at a future date. Per the Monroe Municipal Code, Chapter 2.14.150, all remarks must be addressed to the City Council as a body and not to any individual council members. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes. When speaking, please observe the green, yellow, and red light timer at the podium. The red light indicates that it is time for the next speaker to approach the podium to begin speaking. I'll check with our city clerk. Do we have any speaker slips? We have Leslie Jones, followed by Dylan Rapp. You may approach the podium.
gonna read my statement, otherwise I won't remember any of it. By 2030, 10.8 million Californians will be age 60 or over, representing 1/4 of the state's population. This growth rate is larger than any other age group. Over 2 million Californians aged 60 and over are economically insecure, struggling to afford the rising costs of housing, health, and health care. Almost 30% of older Californians are considered poor or near poor, as significant economic disparities exist, and older Californians are the fastest growing age group experiencing homelessness. The California Department of Aging has announced its request for applications for its local Aging and Disability Action Plan and Grant Program. CDA anticipates awarding grants to up to 36 communities throughout the state to support local communities in planning and creating their own age and disability-friendly action plans. The local plans developed under this grant program aim to improve Lemon Grove's livability and address the current, emerging, and future needs of Lemon Grove's older adults and people with disabilities through transformational policy change. The time to act is now. The first deadline is in just a few days. I have sent an email to Lydia Romero with a link to the plan and the grant action application. I know it's kind of last minute, I just found it, but I implore you to at least go look at the website and start working on a plan to serve our community seniors. My next topic is planning and zoning. A regional housing study projected San Diego will need more than 13,500 housing units every year to meet the demand of all income levels by the end of the decade. In 2022, San Diego City, not Lemon Grove, only authorized construction on 1/3 of that. I'm sure in Lemon Grove, it's even more, less approval. This is needlessly delaying the creation of affordable homes for a city and region that desperately needs them. If we don't figure out a way to make this a uniform, streamlined process, we're going to continue to fall further behind. At the very least, get accurate and current information online to take some of the stress off of the actual people that are actually having to process questions that take a lot of time because people cannot find the information online. Andrew Greer of Thomas Stratford Investment said that quote, the lack of online visibility for zoning and development is a big problem for helping the area grow and be further developed. Investor realtor Derek Jones said, oh no, I never even look in Lemon Grove because permits take forever. I only have a couple seconds, so just let me get to the end here. And I want to say that I implore the City Council to look at the future of Lemon Grove and start planning today for a thriving community with housing for all and a community that is prepared for the coming demographic changes in aging and disability.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you. Next we have Dylan Rapp, followed by Becky Rapp.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Dylan. I'm a high school junior and active in my community playing basketball and football. Being athletic and healthy is very important to me. I would encourage you to come tonight and share with you some of the challenges of the team. Our school district is aware of the mental health struggles of its students and has been providing workshops to assist. One of the most recent workshops included 5 young men from New Life House, a sober living facility. They told of their experiences with homelessness and how they ended up on the streets after several years of drug use. Each young man stated that their drug addiction and their early teens while using pot. These young men saved their own lives by getting the help they needed and are now educating other young people. Lemon Grove students need clear messages that pot use and other drug use is not a short-term solution to stress or depression. With pot shops in our city, I hope the City Council will find a way to educate youth. All the messages we see on the freeway, billboards, and mailers sent to our homes tells us marijuana is safe, and use when in fact it's not.
Thank you so very much. Next we have Becky Rapp, and this will complete the public comment portion of the meeting.
Good evening, Mayor Vasquez and council members. My name is Becky Rapp. I am a concerned parent, specifically for the safety of our children as high potency marijuana is being advertised and commercialized to look appealing to young children. Last week, 8 children, some as young as 12, were treated after consuming marijuana gummies at school. The children ages 12 to 16 fell ill, and several had to be taken to the hospital. And sadly, this story is more and more common. Assemblymember Irwin recognizes this problem and has authored the Cannabis Candy Child Protection Act. It's AB 1207. In the bill, we are reminded of the promises of Prop 64 when it stated, marijuana products shall not be designed to be appealing to children or easily confused with commercially sold candy or foods that do not contain marijuana. Child exposure to and the consumption of marijuana is neither necessary nor acceptable. Our children, youth, parents, schools cannot afford the continued proliferation of marijuana products attractive to children. I bring this to your attention as we have marijuana sold in our city, depicting these child-friendly traits. The state recognizes we have significant problems with current regulations and is working to improve them for the safety and welfare of our children. I would ask you to support 1207 and work towards educating our community about the harm marijuana can have on our youth. And I actually brought a handout for you with AB 1207 and all of the information, the bullet points. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Moving on to, before we move forward, I will turn this over to the city manager to provide a few comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to comment really briefly on the first, Mrs. Jones, the first commenter. We did get the grant. I did pass it on to community services staff. We are looking at it. The deadline is this Friday. It may be an impossible task for us to reach because there is some community outreach that is contained in the grant that we will be way to not get it. So if not, it's on our radar and we'll be able to do it for next year. So we're thankful that we received that grant. And then I just want to mention and remind everybody that Lemon Grove was one of 13 cities in the state of California out of 486 cities to meet all of its meet and exceed its RENA numbers from last year. So we are going to make sure that we're on track for the coming cycle to make sure that we do meet that goal as well.
Thank you so very much. And so we will now move on to our consent calendar. I do have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'd like to move to approve.
We have a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. I'll ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Mendoza? Aye. Councilmember LeBaron?
Councilmember LeBaron? No.
Councilmember Snow?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Castillo?
Aye.
Mayor Vasquez?
Aye.
That motion carries 4-1.
Thank you. Item number 2 is the mid-year budget review. And so I will turn this over to our city finance director, Joseph Ware, to present the mid-year budget review.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. Thank you for having me here this evening to go over our mid-year budget update, as well as a salary plan classification summary update as well. Tonight, what we're looking at is discussing the current budget that is effective for 22-23, starting this past July, going through this current June. It's basically a review of where we're at right now with our revenues and expenditures. We're only covering the general fund and the sanitation fund. All the other funds are not included in this, being that these are only the government funds that we have, that you as the council have access of and approval matters over. We will be requesting some budget adjustments that we will go over, as well as adding some job classifications to the current plan that was approved last June. As you all know, the city's general fund is the primary day-to-day operating fund. When we adopted it in this past June, because of carryover projects from last year that were previously funded and not completed, those funds went into the fund balance, and we had to draw from the fund balance to complete those funds in this fiscal year, because the way government accounting works is you have to recognize revenues in the year that they are received and expenditures in the year that they are completed. So it looks like we are over by $684,000 when we started, when in reality, we had that much money already approved. We just had to pull it from the fund balance because that's the way government accounting works. So on the current activity, where we're sitting at today, actually not today, but as of January 31st, revenue-wise, we've received 56% of our revenue that has been budgeted, and we've only spent 48% of what we projected that we would spend. Now, this does mostly go through December because a lot of the revenues and stuff that we get are on a delayed basis, or what we call an accrual basis. So, for instance, when we go into talking about the sales tax on the first slide here coming up, starting in January, all the sales tax that we receive in January has to be sent to the state by the end of February by the retailers. And then we don't get the actual money until the end of March. So there's that type of a delay, and that's why some of the, when you ask the questions about, is this what we have in the bank right now? It's like, no, this is what we're projected to have based on what our receiving the information that we receive from the states. The numbers that you're receiving tonight are, up here at this point, are where we were at as of January 31st. So on the general fund revenue, our first point is going to be on sales tax. Sales tax itself is picked up at the retails throughout the city of Lemon Grove, and it is by far our largest revenue source. 35% of our revenue comes from sales tax. Of the 7.75% that's paid by the consumer, only 1% actually comes back to the city. Those points of sale transactions come back to us. Online transactions go through what we call the countywide pool, and they're allocated based on our percentage of sales for that particular month. So that can vary back and forth. As we move forward, we saw that our county pool numbers went up because tourism was down. Since Lemon Grove is not a tourism city, we're basically a retail city. All the surrounding cities that are coastal that normally have higher numbers, they themselves, their county pool numbers went down because tourism was down. They weren't getting the hotels, they weren't getting all those dine-in restaurants. We were getting them because we weren't relying on tourism. So as tourism picks up, our county pool numbers will start to decline a little bit. I know the chart is hard to see here, but if you look at it, this comes from our sales tax consultant, HDL. First three sales tax major business groups, the first one is auto, the second is building and construction, and the third is our county pool. You can see that we are up this year, which is a good thing. When we talked about, in the budget meetings last year, we talked about the economic indicators that were coming around with recession, rising interest rates. We're still waiting to see those indicators hit. And most of the time, if you remember, we talked about it as a municipal government, our budgets come in a year in advance. So it normally takes about a year before we truly see what happens into what's happening in the current economy outside of the government sector. So we're going to remain continuously conservative to make sure that when those economic indicators actually do hit here in the city of Lemon Grove, we're not setting ourselves up for failure. We're going to stay on top of that. So initially we budgeted this past year $6,277,110. And actually, the good news is that the sales tax is meeting, or is actually exceeding our expectations. The indicators we talked about have been slow to surface. The biggest one is the recession, unemployment. We haven't seen that hit yet. There's a lot of news about all the tech giants that are laying people off. Was it last week 10,000 people just lost their job from Google? The good thing for the city of Lemon Grove is those high-tech jobs that are going away do not affect our economy because we don't have those particularly within our city. So we're safe from that at this point. There will be a trickle-down effect, and we are monitoring that to see how that's going to affect anything here in Lemon Grove. Some of those little things we talked about before, they keep talking about the recessions, the stocks, the bonds keep going up and down, but our revenue is still remaining pretty steady. And at this point, we are approaching where we're at already, or what we are budgeted for, and we are anticipating that we're going to be $500,000 more than what we originally adopted. So we're going to be requesting that we adjust our sales tax revenue up $500,000 to $6,777,110. Like I said, we've had better than expected growth this fiscal year. However, we are going to remain modest for next year because, as I said, things start a year later here, and so we are anticipating to get a little bit of a slowdown. We talked about the online portion sales tax rate going through distribution centers and counted out. As tourism is now picking up, we're expecting that number to drop just a little bit. So we're going to remain conservative on that amount moving forward. Our next is the property tax, which is our second largest general fund source. We received the revenue from the county in December and March. Our new home sales and our existing home sales have softened a little bit. Basically, the legacy homes that are out there with the interest rates, they're not selling at this point, or they're selling slower than they were in the past. So our new property tax rate is going to change because all those homes that were sold, the tax base now jumps up to the new sales value. So we'll see an increase next year in those numbers, and we'll move forward with the standard either CPI or 2% each additional year from that because that's what's allowed by law. The regular property sales tax, we're not seeing much of a change in. However, the property transfer tax, similar to the supplemental taxes that are paid when the person's closed, they pay at the current rate, and then they get a supplemental bill for the additional amount that should have been paid on the new rate. So we're going to ask that we increase the revenue for the property tax transfer by $20,000. Our next category is the property tax in lieu of VLF. In 2004, the state took away the majority of the vehicle licensing fees for themselves, but they substituted it with property tax in lieu of VLF. This actually benefited the city greater than it did the state of California because we get more money through this than we would have through the vehicle license taxes. With this particular tax, we get 2 payments each year. Once we've received the first, we know exactly what the second one's going to be because it's 2 equal payments. We have to do our best guess for the first one. This year we were off by $66,925, so we will be requesting that we increase the revenue by that amount. Our next category is under franchise fees. These are fees that the utility company pays for right-of-ways, public spaces, of your cable companies, the EDCO, those types of AT&T, and I forget who the last one is. And these fees are based on their business performance, based on their gross receipts. Franchise fees, with the exception of EDCO, are declining, and primarily because your Cox Cable is the one I didn't mention, but what is happening is people are canceling their services and going with streaming. So instead of having, say, a $200 bill with $100 of programming and $100 for your internet, they're dropping all the programming and streaming. So basically, franchise fees are dropping because the performance is going there. We do have it set on a trend to drop about 2 to 3% per year. This year, surprisingly, we were overestimated by $24,000, so we're going to ask to reduce that by $24,400. Our cannabis business sales tax rates, currently we have 2 dispensaries in our city. These are all the categories that we can collect the business tax from. We only have the very first one, which is the retail business. None of the others apply to us, but in the future, if something happens, we do have the ability to take tax in on some of the other aspects of the cannabis business. Measure J, codified chapter 5.46 of the Monroe Municipal Code, and we collect 5% on adjusted gross revenue paid monthly. The city now has 2 active retailers, and the increase in revenue itself has jumped up to about $200,000 is what we're going to be requesting, moving up from basically 525 to 725. Other revenue changes that we have, one other major one to talk about is cost recovery. This is when somebody runs over a stop sign or hits a pole that is damaged, and we find out who the person is. Then we pursue cost recovery of what it took for us to fix those damages. We had to set it about $6,500 this year, which is pretty much the trend, but we did get a one-time settlement for legal action that was taken against the contractor and the engineer for the Lone Grove realignment project. That came in at $482,000, so we are going to ask that we adjust the cost revenue up by that amount. So our total net revenue adjustments is the positive of $1,244,525,000. And with all good news, there's the opposite. So now let's talk about the general fund expenditures. For the most part, there's only 2 areas that really are running off budget, and we'll go over those. The first one is through the fire department. Back in November, December, when council had heard and approved the staff equity adjustment plan, the fire division chief, there was a transposition of numbers. It doesn't affect the budget at all because it was budgeted at the proper amount. We just need to codify and clarify that we are adjusting that amount to the proper, which includes about $652 more a month than what was originally on the plan. And again, like I said, it was budgeted at the proper amount, just got transposed on the chart. The second area is unscheduled overtime. This takes place when people are on leave or we have vacancies or whatever the case may be. In this particular case, we've had 2 vacant firefighters the entire year at this point. We do have 2 that are now in academy. Depending on how that works out, we should be fully staffed, hopefully. If not, we'll go back out to recruit and bring them back on board. But at this point, we are about $90,000 over projected because of those vacancies and leaves that take place on top of that. We are bound by an MOU with minimum staffing requirements, so we have no choice but to staff those. At $90,000, we're doing better than what I would anticipate. If you look at the staffing plans itself, a fully loaded with benefits, plus the UAL, the pension requirements that we have, not counting our OPEB or our future costs that we have to pay for them. Starting firefighters are at $122,000 a year per firefighter. So we're still well under 1 firefighter filling 2 positions plus leave. So I think the fire department's doing a great job in trying to manage all of that at this point. But we are going to request an increase in unscheduled overtime for the fire department at $90,000. Our second area is in public works. This is where we do all the service and repair and maintenance throughout the city. We've talked about in the past with staff coverage. We did not have a public works director or a public works manager for multiple months. Our contracted city engineer stepped up, so it cost us $95,000 more in time that was charged by the contractor to cover. He's semi-pseudo the acting director of public works and covering all those administrative requirements until we were able to hire the new one. So we will be requesting $95,000 increase for staff coverage. Unplanned projects, $164,580, and basically we'll go over those in just a minute with all the different, how those add up. Our street sweeping contract in itself renewed, and it increased $14,500 on the general fund side and $7,500 on the sanitation side. So going over, let me go back through here on the projects, just to give you a better idea. The first one is the Monterey Heights project. Council had authorized an expenditure on December 6, 2022 to install pedestrian crossing signs, flashing signals, and the original allocation that was given by council, we did exceed it by $4,000. Normally, we would not discuss anything under $5,000, but because this was a previous council action, we felt that you needed to know that we did have a $4,000 overrun. But the Monterey Heights project was completed with that. The second unplanned project we had was storm drain repairs in the Cedros and Amber Place areas. There was a $20,000 in engineering cost that was not previously budgeted. This happened mid-year, so we didn't know about it or have any indication it was going to happen. And as an advisory on this one, this is just the engineering cost. So we will be budgeting in next fiscal year for the actual maintenance and repair costs that will be associated with that. But that won't happen until after the new budget comes into play. We also had some unplanned traffic signal repairs at San Miguel and Lemon Grove. The signals themselves, with all the stuff that was happening there, the corrective plan was to move those, relocate those components, which required some additional trenching, conduit installation, and it resulted in almost $50,000 in additional cost that was not previously budgeted. We talked about the street sweeping, so the final portion is in the public works yard. There was a sinkhole that has recently come into play. We've looked at it, had it evaluated, and that is coming in at an estimate of $60,000. So we will be asking for public works, a total increase of $274,180. So what is our new bottom line with all the revenues and the expenditures? Basically started the year 684 out of fund balance to cover the previous year's projects. We're adding 1.2 million to the budget. We're only increasing by 364,000 total, which gives us a projected surplus of $196,000. Now this, I don't want to say that, yes, great, we're going to have a great surplus, because we've had how many atmospheric rivers happen over the last couple of months. And so there's going to be some road repairs and emergency road repairs that are not budgeted that will have to take place. We just don't know what the costs are, so we can't ask for an adjustment at this point. Just letting you know that there will be additional costs that are associated with the storm repair. So where does that leave our unrestricted reserves? Now, these unrestricted reserves are the funds that council has access to. It does not include the 4.6 million that is required by council policy for retaining operational reserves, 25% of the budgeted fiscal year expenditures. So that money is still set aside. This is just the monies that council still has discretion over to spend should they decide to do so. So we started the year with $7.8 million in unrestricted reserves. Adding the 196 would put us at 7.9, almost 8 million, which puts a 43.5% of the current fiscal year's expenditures, percent of the expenditures that have been approved by the budget. Again, that does not include any of potential emergency repairs from all the storm damage that's currently taking place. On to the sanitation fund. In sanitation, there's only two. One, we talked about the first one, the sweeping contract that with the new renewal rate, it went up by $7,500 out of Fund 15, the operating fund. And on the capital fund side, we had previously budgeted, council approved $40,000 for a new truck to replace the one that sanitation has that's from 1990 that jumps into gear whenever it wants to. So what has happened, because of everything that's taken place, vehicle costs have skyrocketed. The fittings for the new utilities beds have skyrocketed, basically doubled the cost. So the newest estimates we have is an increase of $35,000. Neither one of these will have any type of significant impact to the fund balance for sanitation. The vehicle itself was primarily already funded, we just have the additional $35,000. $7,500 is really in the operating budget of $8 million for the sanitation is pretty, is not gonna have any significant impact on what that entails. So the last portion that we're going to talk about is the administrative job classifications. In the budget plan, we always have the summary of classifications as well as the salary plan. Council approves those each year, and basically those are the jobs that we are allowed to hire for. We don't add or change the FTE amounts, we have to swap them in and out, So it's not like it's not asking for new people, it's just asking for new classifications so that as directors and managers move forward into the FY24 budgeting process, and we start looking at the reorganization and how we can better meet the goals and needs of our citizens, we can have these classifications that are administrative to help us do the different jobs. For instance, at this point, as the finance director, I do all my own data entry on the budget because I don't have an administrative person to assist me with it. Not that I'm complaining, it's just that that's the way it is. We don't have anybody to do those tasks at this point. And in order for us to realign the job functions that we discussed last meeting, I have to look at pulling in some administrative people that I can start using to do the data entry, to do the bill paying, the AP, and then I can reallocate the duties of those higher level employees into more of the higher level accounting responsibilities. Same thing in public works. They need the assistance to do those types of things. So all we're asking for at this point is to add 3 classifications to the plan. We're not asking for any additional bodies. So this will have absolutely no impact on the budget. The 3 classifications that were presented at this point are in the staff report as part of the resolution. And those, I'll read those off to you for the record. Basically, it's an office specialist 1, an office specialist 2, an administrative office coordinator. Once you finish with those, then you would go up to the public works secretary, which is already in the plan, and then it would be the executive assistant, which is already in the plan. So in conclusion, basically the general fund is on track. Potential small surplus depending on storm damage. Sanitation fund has some minor adjustments with no significant impact whatsoever. And the staffing classifications that we are asking for do not include, we just don't have the administrative classifications, and that's why we're asking for them at this point. So at that, staff is recommending that you adopt a resolution to approve the 22-23 City of Lemon Grove mid-year budget adjustments, as well as a resolution approving the administrative classifications to the salary and classification plan. And with that, if there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those for you.
Thank you so very much. And so before we move forward to council questions, I'll check in with our city clerk to see if we have any speaker slips.
We do not have any speakers.
Thank you so very much. And so I will call on Councilmember Mendoza to see if you have any questions. You will have the opportunity to ask your questions.
Well, you pretty much answered one of my questions, which was whether the firefighter positions were being filled. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening. And then I had a question. Well, it's not so much a question. It's just, and you addressed this at the beginning of your discussion also, and that's the on page 7 of our staff report, the first thing you list this, $684,000 as a deficit. And so that looks like we're in the hole that amount. I mean, I know that we're not. It's just, I'm just wondering if you could clarify, for the public, what that the project, these are deferred projects, and just clarify what those deferred projects are. And, if you can give us any kind of a rough idea of when those, and the city manager may need to chime in on that. Because these are things that we wanted to do last year, now we've carried them over to this year. What are the deferred projects, and can we have some kind of an idea of when we're gonna start addressing those?
Councilman Mendoza, absolutely. To clarify, the $684,237 is the amount of money that we used from the fund balance to cover all of our expenditures for this current fiscal year. Basically, if you remember from the budget workshop and the budget passing, we had initially $783,000 worth of projects and additions moving forward, which were street pavings, pothole repairs. There was some sewer work. There was some traffic light installations and signage that was taking place. And if you remember, over the past 2 years prior, staffing levels in the public works were very minimal. They had nobody to do the work. So we continued that forward on our CIP projects. So what has happened since then, we've been able to hire the staff. We have the new public works director on board who's been moving things forward. Potholes have been a priority, and they've been getting out there between the rains to get those taken care of. The streets under the 25 PCI have been a priority of council, and so those have been started. There was 2 sewer projects, including root foamings, that had been delayed because we didn't have the people to do them. Those have now been done. I'm seeing all these bills come in, and so we're catching up on all the projects from previous years. Bless you. And they've actually started working on the current projects. So they're moving forward, and we're seeing the progress financially. I actually had a heart stop moment that I had to run up to the city manager and say, we're into fund balance. And she had to calm me down and say, remember. And I'm like, okay, that's right. Sometimes I get so focused on the present that I forget about. So hopefully that answered your question, Councilmember.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will move on to the next council member that is present, and that would be Councilmember Snow.
Thank you so much for preparing the report and taking the time to go through each of these items. One of the first questions I have is, based on the current economy, it looks like things are finally starting to slow down. And does this number, where we're increasing the sales tax estimate of $500,000 more than we had originally anticipated, do you feel like that's a conservative enough approach?
Councilmember Snow, at this point, yes. Our consultant, HDL, is projecting a little bit higher than this. But most recently, we have seen some of the stocks that have been just all over the board, which is normally an indicator, but we can't even take an indication from that at this point. As well as some of the declines throughout the state. Now those declines, again, are primarily in the tourism area, and with all the atmospheric river and all the flooding, some of that tourism has stopped. So that judgment portion is kind of off the record for us at this point. So we're sticking with our conservative approach of what is focused on what Lemon Grove has done, what our trends are, and if you recall from our audit meeting 2 weeks ago, we did have a significant improvement in sales tax last year, and normally what we would do is like a 2% increase off the previous year. I can't see us going up to $7.4 million in sales tax, which is kind of what all the experts are saying. We're staying with just a $500,000 a bump. We may be still a little too conservative, but again, I would rather be conservative and come back to council and say, I was wrong, I underestimated, we have additional funds for you to utilize, instead of coming back saying, oh, I was wrong, we're short, and you've gotta tell us where you wanna cut the budget.
Thank you for that. And then I wanted to go through, the firefighter budget. Now, you had mentioned $122,000 price tag for a new, firefighter, but that's not what they get in their salary, right?
That is correct, that is a fully loaded, what I call fully loaded, fully burdened cost. So that includes their salary, which I believe starts at about $75,000 a year. Then it talks about all your medical benefits, your uniform allowances, your educational allowance. There's paramedic allowance paid, since all of our firefighters are paramedics. There's a boost for that amount. Then you're looking at their pension rates. Currently, the city's paying, I believe, the current rate is 12.4% of their gross salaries and pension costs. Then there's also what we call UAL, unfunded accrued liability for future costs, which CalPERS had a bad year of 6.1 decrease, which we have to make up for in the upcoming years. And so that is going to be running on an annual basis across the fire department itself. Last year was over $600,000. So all of those costs are included in that $122,000. And that's for a beginning firefighter step one.
Okay, and so that's still a pretty significant savings rather than just hiring somebody new. It's still significant savings over the $90,000 that's here.
That is correct, because on top of that 122, we would still have a net pension liability as well as what we call OPEB, which is other pension eligible benefits. So when they do retire, you'll see in the budget where you see healthcare retirees, you see these are things that we have to fund in the future after these people retire. That's not included in the 122, that's on top of.
Okay.
So 122 per firefighter is your basic, what it costs us out of our operating budget each fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem Gaston.
Thank you. Well, I have one question that might be a little bit outside the range of your report, but it certainly relates to what's in your report. And that's that we've been getting a lot of state and federal money, a lot of which is one time. And my question is, if we have unanticipated expenses, maybe related to the storm, can some of that state and federal money be applied toward those needs? And if so, how would that affect the budget that we have?
Mayor Pro Tem, the one-time funding that we have received from state and federal state and federal agencies at this point is specified for general fund use. I know that the city manager has discussed with council briefly on where we're going to go with those funds. Disaster relief is not listed as one of those items at this point. It could be in the future, we don't know for sure. But the one-time funding itself, outside of those fundings, say for instance like the cost recovery, those one-time fundings we certainly can use. And worst case scenario, if need be, council can do an emergency resolution to approve additional funds from our unrestricted reserves to cover those costs until we ourselves can work with the state and federal agencies to see what we can replace out of the funds that we've already received. We have to get approval, so to speak. You know, the old saying is better to ask forgiveness than permission. When federal and state agencies are concerned, absolutely not. You must get permission, and forgiveness does not come.
Mayor Pro Tem Gaston, I want to add on to what Mr. Ware said. none of the grants that we have allow us to backfill the emergency services that we're gonna have to cover due to the storms. However, we have been in contact with Cal OES, and there is a process in which we can get reimbursed, for some of the storm damage. So staff is tracking that. Staff is tracking that, and staff is gonna make sure that we can fully get our reimbursement, or at least the last time we did a Cal OSHA reimbursement, it was about 90 cents on the dollar. So it comes back when we have to use some of those monies.
Of course, in some cases, the work that we need to do might be work that we were going to do anyway, because some of these streets that are damaged were streets that were scheduled to be repaved. And when that's the case, we're very fortunate that's the case for some of the streets. Yeah, I wasn't sure where the distinction is between a street that might be repaved a few years earlier than scheduled, which would seem like just a rescheduling, not necessarily disaster relief, and what's actually considered disaster relief. But it could be that there's some judgment, in figuring out how things are classified. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. Basically, as the public works crews are looking at the storm damage and where they're going, they're of course prioritizing what needs to take place first, safety related at the top, convenience related, basically down towards the bottom. Once those determinations are made, then of course they can look at what their current projects are versus what the storm damage is. In a lot of cases, especially with the current storm damage, the damage in itself is not significant enough as far as the full project is concerned. If you only have let's say a 100-foot section that needs to be replaced versus the 2 miles that's part of the project, of course, the 100-foot section is going to be taken care of, and we're not going to move up the 2-mile project. If the 2-mile project is within close proximity and is easy enough, or it's a safety hazard enough to where they can adjust and swap projects out by date due to the severity of the nature, that would be a call of the Public Works Director and the City Manager to determine the readjustment of those programs. And in that case, then the project monies would pay for it and not storm damage.
That is very helpful, and I'm more thankful than ever that we have a Public Works Director.
And Mayor Pro Tem Gaston, I second that. I'm really glad we have a Public Works Director. But I do want to let you know that, Director Ware mentioned it, we're trying to get ahead of some of the storm damages that we've had in the past couple of months. And with that, myself and the Public Works Director has authorized special teams to work on Fridays to do pothole patching. We have a backlog literally of thousands, and storms like this is the worst thing for potholes because they continue to disintegrate them. So we're trying to catch up. Cold patching doesn't really work in this kind of atmosphere when we have these kind of rains. So they're waiting to get a clear day so they can do the hot cold patching and get teams out there. So we've had 2 successive Fridays, one at the beginning of end of February and one at the beginning of March when we had no rains to get this work done. We're going to continue on that trajectory. So that's kind of cost that we can't recover from Cal OES, but we can recover if for example, if you see where this says caution wet floor, we've had a roof intrusion and we're trying to explore how bad that is. That kind of cost recovery we can put under the Cal OES.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Councilmember LeBaron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A question regarding net revenue adjustments. It's on the slide that's titled Other Revenue Changes, Cost Recovery. I'm gonna have the net revenue then I'll leave this up to you to tell me who's best to answer this question. But right here on this slide, it says other revenue changes, cost recovery of 400, of positive, of 482,000, and that's for one-time settlement for the Lemon Grove realignment project. And for anybody who's not aware of what the Lemon Grove realignment project, that is that intersection over by the Citronica Apartments and the Lemon that's been non-functioning for many years. So while I see that there's a cost recovery of a positive of 482, that begs the question of how much money did the city spend in cost and legal fees in the realignment lawsuit?
That particular lawsuit in itself, Councilmember LeBaron, was prior to my arrival, and we did not, I do not have those figures with me at this point. We would have to pull those and send those to council at a later date.
Thank you, Joe. Like I said, this was something that's many years in the making, so surely while you're new, and I appreciate your response, there are two staff members here who have been here for a long enough time to be able to at least provide a ballpark number on that. Thank you, Joe.
I can look it up, but I don't have those figures in front of me. I can bring it back to you.
Do you have an approximation or guesstimate? We've been in this lawsuit for several years. You guys have talked about this in depth in closed session, and
It's been completed for some time, so I would have to look up those numbers. If you asked me in advance, I could have been prepared.
no, not even a ballpark. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to have restated on the record what the positive is for the city, the positive number.
Madam Mayor, the positive net revenue adjustment itself is $1,244,525.
Thank you so very much. And as I look on the conclusion slide, it says staffing classifications do not include administrative classifications. And so with this and the recommendations, it says adopt a resolution approving the addition of the administrative classifications to the City of Lemon Grove personnel salary and classification plan. Can you restate what those classifications are?
Madam Mayor, absolutely. Those classifications itself are included in the Exhibit 1 of the resolution for anybody who would like to look along. And primarily, it is Office Specialist 1, Office Specialist 2, and the Administrative Office Coordinator. Those are 3 levels, entry, mid, above, and then immediately for succession itself would be a Public Works Secretary above that, which is already in the plan, and then the Executive Assistant, which is already in the plan. And just for the record and clarification for everyone, we're not asking to add 3 people, just the classification so that we have the flexibility to reorganize our current staffing levels to include some administrative functions once we're able to look at where we're moving and what we need to do to best serve our constituents.
Thank you for clarifying that it is risk to add the classifications. I will circle back with a round 2 of questions, and this is the opportunity for you to ask 2 questions and provide comments before seeking a motion and a second. And so I will start with Councilmember Mendoza.
I think we've addressed all the questions that I had, and I did talk with the city manager earlier today, so she clarified some things for me as well. So I appreciate that. It does help to talk to staff before the meeting. And I also appreciate that we're projecting a budget a profit or a positive, a surplus, thank you, that's a better word. And I like that we're just not making any big plans for that because we've all been driving around on our streets lately, and, there's a lot of work that's gonna need to be done once it stops raining. So, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Barron.
I guess it's, a bit of a, more so a comment, just an observation, because with the current staffing, and this is in regards to administrative job classifications, which is extremely important that City Hall, our house be in order, that city management be efficient in order to best serve the public. And just in my honest and professional observations of the functions at City Hall and how the city is managed, I've noticed that there seems to be a lot of room or areas of opportunity with our current staff members and the jobs that they do and how they're delegated to do their jobs. So while I can appreciate that there's this effort to include more job classification so that we can streamline processes at City Hall, I think that we need to step back and look at before doing that as a solution. I feel that there's just more fundamental issues at play just in how the city is run and managed, period. Because I feel with the positions that are now, it's not managed very efficiently or effectively. So adding more classifications isn't going to address, in my professional opinion, isn't going to address the amount of mismanagement that we have in City Hall. So it's not really going to be a solution. It's going to make everything more streamlined, as pleasant and peachy as this all sounds on paper. Professional operations of things.
Thank you. Councilmember Snow.
So personally, I would love to throw all 196,000 of that at all the potholes right now. It is quite a pothole extravaganza, out there. One thing I did want to go, through was I really support the city's approach in being conservative with sales tax. My experience is that with our community, a lot of us are working class families. We are feeling the hit with gas prices, energy costs, water costs, and a lot of people are buying gas with credit cards. A lot of people are buying groceries with their credit cards, and the credit card debt is going crazy right now, and people just aren't able to make ends meet. And someday that reckoning is coming, and I think it's coming sooner rather than later. So I appreciate the conservative approach and in maintaining that. It respects what we're going through and realizes the true kind of world that we live in, especially as lemon growers. Then on the general fund expenditures, I appreciate that we've been able to meet the MOU requirements of the fire department salaries. I'm really excited, like Jennifer said, to see our new firefighters getting on board. And we look forward to seeing decreases in those overtime costs so our firefighters can go home and spend precious time with their families. One of the things that makes me sick is that the Kunkel Park was vandalized and about 30 grand worth of damage was done there. That 30 grand is what we need to put lights on the Little League field. That 30 grand is what we need to put into pickleball. So just one thing, shout out to the community. Let's do a better job of making sure that we care for what we do have so that we can get nice things put into place and get some fun things out there instead of playing cleanup for vandalism. And then I think that's all I have except for on the administrative job positions. I've spent a lot of time as a supervisor and on leadership councils in different positions. And I think giving people opportunity for growth, an entry point, and then opportunity for growth, expectations and salary ranges helps encourage people to come in. Lemon Grove is one of the training grounds for citywide service and public service. And so we want to attract talent, but a lot of people are coming to us without a ton of skills. And this gets them in the door and gives them the opportunity to get the work done. And then we also don't need engineers doing data entry, that's inefficient. And we could do that a lot cheaper. And so these administrative ranges give us the ability to do that, to appropriately assign job responsibilities to those best suited to fill those responsibilities. So I would support these new classifications. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gastel.
Thank you. Yeah, the job classifications are a wise thing that we put a lot of thought into. I'm not sure that the discussion of job classifications is that pertinent to the budget, because it's this set of decisions that were made elsewhere. But I definitely think that we're on the right track. We want to keep our staff, and we want to use the staff as effectively as we can with minimal turnover. And I think that's really what it's all about, is making the staff as effective as possible with minimal turnover. My view might be a little bit different than some people when it comes to conservative versus not conservative projections on sales tax revenue. I'm not actually sure it makes all that much difference whether we project sales tax revenue accurately or not. I think the important thing is that we collect as much as we can, and we save as much as we possibly can. Because the reality is that during the good times, we need to stockpile and do one-time things, and during the hard times, we need to be able to draw on reserves and do what's necessary to get through the hard times. So whether we act, I mean, it's good to know in advance, to have an idea of what you're gonna collect, but for what we actually do, for how we actually carry out the function of the city, I'm not actually sure if it makes that much difference, whether we know what we're getting in. The point is that we have to spend conservatively, not so much that we have to be conservative in our expectations. It could have something. It could relate to the public message, and that's true. And we certainly want to give the public, make sure the public understands that revenues are not very predictable, and that we have to expect good times as well as hard times. And sometimes I have to tell people that we're in good times, and some people don't realize this. And good times are actually probably more common than bad times. But the bad times are what we tend to remember, because they can be really, really bad. So I guess I don't really have a question. Oh, as far as the realignment is concerned, it might be worth noting that sometimes we take things on not knowing what to expect, and sometimes we do very well, and sometimes we don't do very well. Realignment is one where we were wise to take on that legal battle, and even though we don't have the figures, because it's old history that doesn't actually directly relate to this budget discussion, it is safe to say that we're collecting more in the settlement than we spent in the attorney's fees. So it's definitely a wise idea to take that one on when the company didn't produce the kind of quality product that was expected. So I guess that's all I have to say, and thank you again for walking us through this.
Thank you so very much. And before I seek a motion on this particular agenda item, I just want to take this opportunity to thank staff for preparing this agenda item, but also addressing and answering our questions. For any government agency, the budget is everything. It serves as the core, and it provides funding to support the quality of life that we all love to enjoy. But also, it provides an opportunity to improve. And with a surplus sounds great. And honestly, to know that there is a surplus in place, that means that the work and efficiency of staff and the decisions that we make, it's spot on. However, we do know that we are facing very challenging times. And we spoke with some of the environmental challenges, of course, with the rain. But also our economy is structured right now in such a way that it's not predictable. And fees for everyone, the fees are increasing, not just for government agencies, but also for each and every one of us. And so it is imperative that in this moment, we really take a look at what we have for today and allocate funding wisely as we move forward. So again, thanks for highlighting that, yeah, there's a surplus, but I do believe that there's gonna be a surplus of funding needs that are gonna come forward in the future. And so those are my comments for this particular agenda item. And at this time, I will check with our elected leaders to see if we have a motion and a second.
I'd like to, is it working? I'd like. It is working? Oh, it is working now. I'd like to move that we accept the budget as presented. The budget projections.
I'll second, and is that gonna include the personnel classifications? Do we have to do a separate motion?
And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and clarify what the motion should be. It is to adopt the resolution approving the fiscal year 2022-23 City of Lemon Grove budget adjustments and approving the addition of administrative job classifications to the City of Lemon Grove salary and classification plan.
Sorry to interrupt, there should be two separate motions because you could vote yes or no on either one of those, so please take them one at a time.
Thank you so very much. So then what we will do is we will take the first one, which is to adopt the resolution approving the financial year 2022-23 City of Lemon Grove budget adjustment. And so that will be the first motion.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Gasso and a second by Councilmember Mendoza, and I'll ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Mendoza,
Aye.
Councilmember LeBaron,
Councilmember LeBaron, aye.
Councilmember Snow,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Gasko,
Aye.
Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
That motion carries 5-0.
Thank you so very much. And the second motion will be to approve the addition of the administrative job classifications to the City of Lemon Grove salary and classification plan.
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I will ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Mendoza,
Aye.
Councilmember LeBaron,
Councilmember LeBaron, no.
Councilmember Snow,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Gasko,
Aye.
Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
That motion carries 4-1.
Thank you so very much. Moving on to council member meeting reports, the section of the meeting is dedicated to oral reports from the city council about meetings attended at the expense of the city or appointed boards, commissions, and city events. The report should be a brief summary of meetings attended in your capacity as a city official. As a reminder, we want to be careful to keep these comments brief and to stay within the boundaries of the Brown Act. This includes matters that are not on the agenda. I will call on each council member individually to provide a report, and each council member will have a maximum of 2 minutes to provide their report. And I will start with Councilmember Mendoza.
On March 13, I attended the League of California Cities Southern California Division monthly meeting where we received a legislative update. On March 17, I attended the Cal Cities Transportation, Communications, and Public Works Committee meeting as a member of that committee. And we heard from various water agencies on their water project reports, updates. And we also got a further legislative update on climate resiliency, Safe Drinking Water Bond Act, and the Drought and Resiliency Bond Act. I also, speaking of Kunkel Park, I met with several of our pickleball enthusiasts at Kunkel Park to talk about the plans to turn the basketball court into a pickleball court, and I believe that they're moving forward with those plans. And I also met with the principal of the school next door to Kunkel Park, and they do appreciate all the assistance from the sheriff's department. They've had quite a bit of vandalism at the school, and they do appreciate your help and advice. But that vandalism is being carried over to the school. They've had quite a bit of incidents themselves and are quite concerned. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Guerin. Kim? Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to report on 3 meetings that I've had over the last couple weeks that pertain to the public's business, and that has to do with Lemon Grove Avenue and Palm Street, the non-functioning intersection, the Lemon Grove Senior Center, and Lemon Grove efforts to further support Lemon Grove pickleball. Regarding the meeting that I had with residents about Lemon Grove Avenue and Palm Street, there are residents that are concerned that they're not hearing from the city regarding that non-functioning intersection. Just, I believe it was this weekend, there was an accident. Something happened at that intersection, so that of course sparks people to be even more concerned as if there's just a continuance of accidents at that intersection. It's now been broken for many, many months. It's a safety hazard. I told people that I would be reaching out or continuing in my efforts to hear back from city staff and all parties involved in that and getting that repaired, and then I would be reporting out to the public as soon as I had more information. Regarding the Lemon Grove Senior Center, I've had a meeting with constituents to discuss the senior center, how it was funded, why it was shut. I have since sent an email to City Manager Leah Romero and have not gotten any response, and I assured people that I had a meeting with it. As soon as I had more information, that I would be reporting out to the public. Regarding pickleball, I had a meeting with people who are instrumental, in pickleball, bringing pickleball to the community, making it available to the community. And they have good news that they're excited to be working together with my colleagues Jennifer Mendoza, and Alton Snow, and George, and Raquel, and the manager on making pickleball be more accessible, or on doing things to make it be more accessible to the larger community. So that is also something I'm happy to report on. I have more information.
Thank you so very much. Next, we have Councilmember Snow.
On March 13th, I attended the League of Cities event for the San Diego region. On March 15th, I attended the League of Cities legislative review meeting. There's over 2,600 new legislative bills. I'm very interested in tracking the bills that will help our city regarding the opioid and fentanyl abuse, and also addressing homelessness. There's quite a few bills out there right now that are designed and geared to helping with the homelessness situation, and so I'm actively following those. Also on May 15th, I was able to attend the East County Economic Development Council, and that was a really interesting meeting. And one of the takeaways is that La Mesa has a entrepreneurship program. We're exploring different ways that we can bring a similar program here to encourage small Lemon Grove businesses to develop and thrive. On March 17th, I attended the League of Cities Community Services Policy Committee. I'm now on that committee. That helps drive the direction of where the League of Cities is putting their efforts as far as legislative policy goes on the state level and how we're going to advocate. I'll also be going to Sacramento to help lobby for our city up there. So be sure to reach out to me if there's something that's on the radar that you want me to do. I've taken note of some of the issues that were brought up during public comment. On March 17th, I attended the CARE Act Working Group. So this is the program that's to help homelessness among the severely mentally ill. On March 18th, I helped with the food distribution. On March 18th, I also went to the school district's Family Fun Day in Chesterman, which was actually really fun. That was an exciting event and lots of community members attended. And on this morning, on March 21st, I attended the Contractor State Licensing Board's legislative meeting where they were discussing supporting a fund to help protect homeowners who've been defrauded by the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program and trying to get a restitution fund added to the May revise of the state budget. That's it.
Thank you so very much. Next, we have Mayor Pro Tem Jones, not Jones, Gastel. I think you must be talking about it, but Gastel?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I attended my first meeting as the new chair of the Accessibility Services Advisory Committee of MTS. And that's quite a wonderful committee with many different people that are involved in providing transportation to people with disabilities. And I also attended the MTS meeting last week. Some highlights, one thing looming over MTS is a driver shortage that is very persistent, and it's affecting service. Ridership is rebounding. People are mostly returned to their trolley and bus riding habits. But the situation with drivers is an ongoing challenge. And another thing that's similar to the discussion that we're having about the budget, MTS is very aware that they are drawing heavily on federal funding that will pretty much be gone in about 3 years. So there's a discussion about how MTS will avoid a budget crisis in 3 years when the federal money runs out. Either less service or more fees or more money from other places or deferred projects. It's a list of choices that aren't very good, but it's a discussion that has to happen in 3 years to figure out how to make the buses and the trolley run without all the federal money that's streaming in. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you so very much. And, shortage of funding is the topic of the day, as I met with Assemblymember Weber to discuss funding opportunities. And right now, that's the biggest challenge with the state. They are looking at a deficit, but we met to discuss maybe some potential funding opportunities here in Lemon Grove. But right now, as it stands, there is no money to fund projects. And I just wanted to share that with everyone. I also attended the Sandbag Board Retreat, where elected officials and stakeholders reviewed and discussed regional transportation, housing, and environmental priorities and state and federal requirements. We identified potential processes, improvements, areas for collaboration, and discussion point for 2023. And it was a really great opportunity to connect and to collaborate. And what I'm looking forward to is not a 2-day retreat here in Lemon Grove, but an opportunity for perhaps a half-day team building session where we will collaborate. I also attended the Governance, Transparency, and Labor Relations Policy Committee meeting for the League of California Cities, where we got a workers' compensation update, an update on cybersecurity. We also went over the legislative agenda, and we received a legislative update. And that completes my report. I will take this opportunity to turn it over to our city manager, Lydia Romero.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have one report. It's one that is, I'm sad to report out. Today is Lieutenant McAvoy's last day with the city of Lemon Grove. He is being promoted to captain as of Friday, so he has a new assignment. Congratulations, is well deserved. This is our track record is pretty good. The last lieutenant, if you all remember Lieutenant Rand, he was promptly promoted to captain after he left us as well, and now he's Commander Rand. So we get good folks here. Our new lieutenant will be starting on Monday. His name is Lieutenant Barry. I don't have any of his information, but as soon as I have it, I will give it to the council. So I want to say thank you very much for your 2 years of service, and good luck, Captain.
Thank you.
And I will echo the sentiment here, in terms of the value that you have brought to public safety here in the city of Lemon Grove. And so while we are very happy that you are promoting, I just want to let you know that you will be missed. What I will do now is I will turn it over to our city attorney, Stanky, to adjourn the meeting into closed session.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and City Council. We are adjourned to closed session for 3 items. The first is conference with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation under Government Code 54956.9D2. We have 1 case to discuss. The second item is a conference with labor negotiator under Government Code 54957.6. That is the public works employees and public works supervisors under ACSME, which is a acronym for the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, District Council 36. The third item is conference with labor negotiator under Government Code 54957.6 with the regarding the employee organization Lemon Grove Firefighters Association, International Association of Firefighters, Local 2728. Thank you.